Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wytpod. My name is Harshit, and I'm the Director of Business Alliances at Wytlabs. We are a digital agency specializing in SaaS and e-commerce SEO. And I've got George London with me today. He's the CTO at Upwave, a very powerful analytics platform for brand advertising. A big welcome to you, George. So happy to have you with me today.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Ben, buddy, can you tell us about your journey in tech industry and how you became involved with Upwave? It's been quite a long journey as well within the organization for you.
Yeah, so I've had a bit of a non-traditional career journey in technology. I actually did not even study computer science. I studied philosophy at Yale. Then, as I was about to graduate, realized it's a little bit hard to get a well-paying job in philosophy. So I needed to get a real person job and ended up getting a job doing investment research at Bridgewater Associates, which is the world's largest hedge fund. That was a really fascinating role. It taught me all about macroeconomics and investing and the financial industry. I also started about 15 days before Lehman Brothers blew up and the global financial crisis started. So it was a really interesting front row seat to some pretty massive turmoil in the financial industry. But luckily, Bridgewater had managed to see the crisis coming. And so they were well positioned to ride it out. And I got to do some really interesting analysis there. In particular, I worked on a cool project trying to integrate data streams about government financial spending from things like the Stimulus Act, which were spending literally hundreds of billions of dollars trying to help turn the crisis around. And that was both a really interesting modeling problem and an interesting data management problem because I was looking for data from all these different sources and government statistics agencies and things like that, and trying to put that together into a coherent picture that would show how the spending was impacting growth and economic health, both in the US and in other countries. So that kind of really gave me a taste for how impactful data can be on effective decision making, because Bridgewater was making very high stakes decisions all the time. They were investing billions of dollars, betting that either growth was going to go up or was going to go down. And so it was very important to get the answer. And so after a few years of doing that, I realized that I was more interested in the data problems than in the financial problems specifically, and left to do my own startup that was trying to help initially make it easier for people to find data for use in financial modeling. That went through a few different pivots and iterations, as many startups do, but it eventually became a platform for helping people find metadata about music and get more connected with musical culture. And then on top of that, built an app that recommended electronic music that was both personalized to your individual taste, but also to your activity at a given time. So if you're looking for quiet study music or looking for high energy dance music, it would find the music that was right for you. That was also a fascinating startup experience, but it taught me the critical importance of distribution in consumer apps, which is something that one should very much not take for granted, and also the very substantial legal and economic challenges of working in the music industry. I decided to move on from that, but through that process, I had sort of built some cool recommendation systems and learned even more about data management and the programming skills required to do that effectively. So that set me up really well to join Upwave, which is where I've been for the last 8 years. Upwave, I started out helping them do statistical analysis of survey data, because Upwave's core business is helping advertisers, particularly brand advertisers, plan, measure, and optimize brand advertising campaigns. There's two major types of digital advertising. There's what's called direct response, where you're trying to get somebody to click on a link and buy something right away, which is what things like Google AdWords typically are. They're trying to drive very short-term conversions. But then it's everything else that tends to have longer-term objectives, and it doesn't typically drive a click at all. A canonical example would be, say, a car commercial, which is not trying to get you to jump off your couch and buy a car today, but instead is trying to make sure that the next time you're in the market for a car, you remember that Mercedes or Toyota exists, and hopefully you consider one. And so, because nobody can click on a car commercial, it can be very challenging to actually figure out the cause and effect of how the money you're spending on your brand campaigns is translating through to actual business outcomes. And so Upwave helps close that gap by tracking exposure to ad campaigns and then targeting surveys to people who've seen ads and have not seen ads. And by sort of carefully comparing people exposed to ads to people who have not been exposed, and using a process called causal inference to remove any pre-existing effects of targeting, you can actually calculate a correct incremental unbiased estimate of the lift that's driven by these ad campaigns. And you can say these car commercials for Toyota actually made people 10% more likely to consider buying a Toyota. The key to being able to do all of this is being able to actually record and track and organize and analyze both ad impression data and survey data. And so it's the data management and so Python-based programming skills I learned from my previous roles were really helpful for building that analytical engine that continues to power Upwave statistical analysis today. At Upwave, I started writing code, but then got into management over a few years, worked my way up in management, and then became CTO a couple of years ago.
Brilliant, buddy. And thank you for sharing such insightful journey map altogether. That's brilliant. I would love to understand when it comes to the core USPs of Upwave, what are the main unique value propositions that sets the platform apart from other competitors out there in the market, in the space?
Yeah, so Upwave does many different things to help make brand advertisers most effective. But the most commonly recognized thing that we offer is what's called brand lift, which is just telling advertisers how much their ad campaigns drove increases in core KPIs like awareness and consideration. Brand lift is not a new thing. It's been done for decades, but it's traditionally been done as a consulting and research service with sort of very human involvement, with humans sort of handwriting surveys, setting them up, setting up tracking, doing all the analysis, in Excel or other desktop programs, these kinds of things, and then sort of carefully putting together a PowerPoint presentation at the end and giving a big sort of grand reveal of the PowerPoint. And it's certainly better for advertisers to know how their campaign did than to not know. But the problem with all of this is, one, it's a very expensive, very labor-intensive consulting engagement. And two, you typically don't get the results until after the campaign is over. Maybe you get a mid-campaign report if it's a 3 or 6 month campaign. Typically, you don't get real clear answers until the campaign is already done. And so that means that by the time you get analysis of performance, it's too late to do anything to improve the campaign. If the campaign, almost no campaign comes out the gate perfect. Some of them are highly effective, but still have substantial room to improve. Some campaigns are just not that effective for one reason or another. And if you know that early in the campaign, then you can actually understand what's going wrong and you can do something to improve it. And you can make sure that the money that you spend on the campaign actually ends up being well spent. But if you don't have the results until the end, it's too late to do that. And so Upwave's kind of core thesis is that we could turn this brand lift process from a consulting thing into a software thing. And we could basically completely automate from end to end the process of commissioning brand lift, setting it up, executing it, doing the analysis, and doing the reporting. And it's been a journey over years to get all the way to automation because the advertising ecosystem is complex, but we've gotten really very close to having everything fully automated to the point where we can now be a button in certain demand side platforms where somebody who's buying an ad campaign can just click the Upwave button and say, okay, everything happens automatically behind the scenes, and suddenly they get actual granular, actionable reporting on how their campaigns are performing and optimization recommendations that can tell them how to make that campaign better in real time. And then sort of even to put a cherry on top, the advent of generative AI in the last year has meant that we can even do reporting that is comparable in quality to what used to take human consultants days or weeks of time to do. And we actually will even give you a complete PowerPoint presentation available at any time during your campaign that summarizes how it's going. Upwave really pretty much offers everything that all the competitors offered at similar or better quality, but also with these really key advantages of being both much more cost efficient and much more timely and thus more actionable.
What are some of the key technologies and tools that basically power Upwave's analytics capabilities?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on under the hood. The interface that our users, who are mostly either advertisers or large publishers, interact with is a pretty familiar SaaS web dashboard. not that dissimilar to other SaaS tools in its appearance. It's a sort of a basic client server, React front end, JVM ecosystem back end. But kind of where the real magic is happening is all of the analytics that's happening under the hood. We have to ingest advertising data. Ad campaigns are very large, so we're ingesting tens to hundreds of billions of events per month, tracking all these different campaigns we're ingesting, which means we need to have a large, complex, scalable data pipeline for ingesting all this advertising data. And then we also need to go out and collect the survey responses on our own. We have our own in-house survey collection mechanism. We work with a number of external partners who integrate what we call our survey wall, which is basically like a paywall, except instead of having to pay money to read an article or play a game, people take a survey to unlock some premium content. And then that lets us collect survey responses. And then those survey responses have to go through some complex statistical analysis. So we have a pretty bespoke, internally created, we call our analysis pipeline, that's doing some pretty heavy duty statistics using Python and the various Python data and machine learning toolkits. And then, as I mentioned recently, we've added generative AI capabilities. So we're using OpenAI's GPT-4 to integrate all this data that we're collecting and produce dynamic human readable reporting on top of that.
That's brilliant. Now, what are some of the most common challenges your clients face when optimizing their digital advertising campaigns? And basically, how does the platform address these challenges?
Yeah, so I'd say there's two major things. One that I touched on earlier, which is timeliness. The campaigns we measure typically run between a month and a year. And so have large amounts of money spent on them. And so being able to have results promptly enough that you can actually make decisions and make changes early enough in the campaign to make a big difference is a perennial challenge. And so that's one of the reasons people come to Upwave, again, is because we give them data very early in a campaign and do as much as we can to make it actionable early, to sort of let people have as much clarity and confidence as they can in the analytics that we're doing, and sort of tell them as clearly as possible which tactics are working best for them, whether that's they're advertising on 100 different websites and 5 of those are really driving performance and 10 of those are driving performance down. We can tell them clearly and early which websites they should emphasize in order to get the best results. And the second challenge, I would say, is just complexity. Advertising is complex. The ad tech ecosystem is complex. Modern national brand campaigns may have media plans with hundreds or even thousands of line items on them. They're advertising on hundreds of different websites, many different channels. They might have digital banner ads and connected TV and streaming audio all on the same campaign. And so being able to accurately track exposures across all those channels and calculate performance and compare performance in an apples to apples fashion is a challenge. And so Upwave has put a lot of work into making it as smooth and ergonomic as possible for people to just get set up with all the tracking they need to do, have that happen seamlessly, and then have all the reporting come out in a way that is clear and understandable. And then so the generative AI innovations we've done lately have also been really helpful for boiling down sort of the very large data sets that can be produced into something that is human readable and understandable, and that highlights to people sort of both what is most impactfully driving performance on a campaign and also where the biggest opportunities are to actually make changes. Advertisers can't realistically change everything on a media plan, even if it might be optimal to do so. Being able to point them in the right direction towards a small enough set of things that are going to be high impact, that they can actually focus their energy there and make real changes, it's a challenge they have, but it's one that Upwave is really focused on helping solve.
Sure. Now, George, in order to make continuous improvement in your own platform, customer feedback plays a very vital role, right? Do you have any such mechanism on your own platform from where you get the customer feedback and you try to and make the platform better?
Yeah, so we use the pretty common suite of analytical tools, things like Google Analytics, other SaaS tools in that category that help us understand our users' engagement and activity in our platform. And we look for points of frustration, we look for common user flows, and then find patterns that we can put more emphasis on making smoother or more accessible or more intuitive for people. We also talk to our customers frequently. We have a support team and a support@upwave.com alias that does an amazing job of taking questions from customers and really getting to the bottom of what they're trying to do, and both helping them solve the problem in the short term, but then also our product organization talks on a very regular collaborative basis with our support and success organizations to understand what our customers really want. And then we try to be as customer obsessed as we can in designing our roadmap to make sure that the things we're building are the features and capabilities that our customers are really going to get the most value out of.
That's wise. All right. I would love to understand what are some of the technical and strategic challenges that you have encountered while scaling the platform's capabilities.
Yeah, I'd say I have to give credit to cloud services like AWS that they really have changed the game in terms of helping startups take more scalable approaches. You still have to architect your systems in a good and scalable way, which we have put a lot of effort into doing. But we found that the data platforms we built, because they were designed to be parallelizable and horizontally scalable, kind of as we get more data, pretty much all we have to do is just press a metaphorical button in AWS to add more compute power to our clusters, and we're able to scale pretty smoothly from a technical perspective. I'd say that one of the bigger challenges we've had has been going back to the complexity of media measurement and just there's so many different places that you can advertise nowadays. There's so many different channels, there's so many different websites, so many different approaches between going back even just to streaming audio. There's so many different podcasting platforms and websites that do streaming and people streaming on different devices and these kinds of things. And Upwave wants to help our customers through advertisers measure their campaigns everywhere they're running. Many of our customers are also publishers who may run various streaming apps that have sort of many different types of ads, whether they're host-read ads directly in the podcast or they're dynamically inserted ads. And so just being able to keep, and on top of this, the industry is constantly introducing new channels and new ad types and new formats and that kind of thing. And so just being able to keep up with making sure that we can track all these different types of exposures and provide the sort of granular reporting that our customers need, it keeps us on our toes.
No, makes sense. All right. What are some of the emerging trends that you foresee in the brand advertising, basically like analytics space altogether over the next few years? What are those?
Yeah, so there's two things that I would really highlight. One, I will just call digital convergence. People in the industry have been talking for a long time about convergent TV, which just means the fact that TV used to be broadcast. Originally, it was radio signals. I can, from my house, see the Sutro Tower in San Francisco, which is the big radio tower over the city that broadcasts TV signals to the Bay Area. And we then moved on to cable, which was still a broadcast mechanism. But over the last decade, we've been moving to connected TV, which is just TV coming through the internet. And TV is still a medium where people spend a huge amount of time and where a huge amount of advertising is delivered. And the fact that TV has become digital has really changed the way that TV advertising is created, bought, and measured. But so the convergence of TV is not the only thing that's converging. It's really that all types of media are converging to become digital. I've mentioned streaming audio a couple of times. Audio also used to just be radio, which was broadcast and much harder to measure, much harder to address. But now people are listening to a tremendous amount of audio that's delivered through the internet, through apps and that kind of thing. Print magazines still exist, but they're going away, at least to an extent, and being replaced by people reading just about everything through screens. And when virtually all media consumption is digital, that means that any type of advertising that's done through those media can in theory be done using the same common set of advertising tools that have been developed over the last couple decades. And suddenly radio ads are not just something that are recorded once and broadcast to a million people. Instead, each individual person listening to a podcast can get ads that are, in some sense, particularly made appropriate and interesting for them. And the opportunities for measurement also become much greater. And the easier something is to measure, the easier it is to optimize. And so that means that the plausible performance of advertising just really goes up. But it also means that people who maybe are more used to traditional ways of buying advertising have pressure to adapt to this sort of more modern landscape and to actually start thinking through a performance lens. In many ways, brand advertisers for a long time have been insulated from needing to think too much about performance because performance on linear TV or radio has been very challenging to measure in the past. But now it's easy. All you have to do is work with a company like Upwave, and suddenly you can start actually sort of collectively understanding your campaign across all its channels and actually start optimizing and taking a real performance mindset. And that's a huge opportunity, but it's also a mindset shift. The second major trend I would highlight is AI, which I think is just going to be, has already been transforming the industry, but has so much further to go on transforming things. There is just, as a bit of a broken record on this, but there's a lot of complexity in advertising. There's a lot of time that's spent on just trying to make different systems work together effectively to execute a modern ad campaign. And that has traditionally required a lot of expertise, a lot of trial and error, a lot of frustration from a lot of people. And AI, even in its current generation, is already able to act as a connector between many different systems or a translator. So, even things like taking the reporting on a brand lift campaign, which was, sometimes thousands of different numbers and required quite a bit of human interpretation analytics, and being able to just pass that as well-engineered prompts into GPT-4 and get back a clear, accessible summary is so time-saving. And we're working on things that are going to help people take those recommendations and hopefully make them more directly actionable in other tools. And this is just with the current generation, but AI is getting better over time and getting smarter every year. And as it gets smarter, the scope of things that are going to be possible to have it help with will just increase. And I think people are going to find that the process of executing advertising becomes a lot easier over time as people are able to rely more on AI to help them out with the day-to-day. But sort of it goes even farther than that if you start looking a little bit farther into sort of the impact of AI, the impact that AI can potentially have, because AI can do things like help with what's called advertising creative, which is the, say, actual TV commercials. I just a few weeks ago on X, formerly known as Twitter, saw a commercial from Toys R Us that was produced entirely using Sora, which is OpenAI's video model. And it's a little unnatural. Like, it doesn't quite feel all the way like a commercial. If you just look at the progress that video models have made over the last year and take this Toys R Us commercial and extrapolate it a year into the future, or 2 years or 5 years, it's really not that hard to see how these things are going to become much better, and I've soon potentially become indistinguishable from things that were produced by humans, or even better than things that were produced by humans in the not too distant future. And as it becomes easier to connect data on performance to things like the actual creative that you're putting together and how you're delivering that creative through the media, the opportunities for doing really effective advertising using AI are going to become pretty impressive over time. But that also has its own challenges, which is that as there's going to be more and more AI-empowered advertising over time, there's going to be something of a flood of this type of advertising, which consumers may have negative reactions to, and you may start to see the consumers try to distance themselves more from advertising by doing things like using AI to do product research on their own, or using AI as what you could call a buyer's agent. For example, somebody shopping for a car may no longer go to Edmunds or to the car manufacturer's website, but may instead start their search by going to an AI and saying, this is my family arrangement, these are my needs, what kind of car is best suited for me?
Yeah.
And if the AI is just boiling the information down and making a recommendation for them directly, then there's fewer opportunities for the car companies to influence decision making through advertising. So it's going to be this really interesting race between advertising getting better, but then people relying less on advertising to become informed about their product
Yeah, you
buying
mentioned
decision
actually a
process.
very legit point, George. The shift has already started. People shifting from the traditional Google search to the generative AI. Tons of options available. In fact, search engines are now adapting to that change. Must have seen AI overviews populating on the search results. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. So the next couple of years, see how this thing unfolds and to what level and where exactly the inclination of people lies. So yeah.
Exciting times.
All right. You're continuously hiring people. I would love to understand how do you foster a collaborative environment within your engineering team at Upwave?
Yeah. So culture is something I think is really very important to organizational success. But the key thing about culture is that culture is what you do, it's not what you say. And you can put together a culture PowerPoint presentation and talk to your company at an offsite about these are our company values and these are the things we believe. But then if you go home the next day and you as a leader act in a way that is inconsistent with those values, then people will immediately understand that the real culture of this company is what the leaders are doing on a day-to-day basis, no matter what they say the values are. If you want to be collaborative or you want to have a collaborative culture, then you as a leader need to collaborate with the people on your team. You need to listen to them. You need to treat them respectfully. You need to be transparent with them. And you need to reward collaboration when you see it. You need to give people positive feedback when they're acting collaboratively. You need to give people negative feedback when they're acting not collaboratively. And you need to actually every day show up and create that environment through your actions. And I do genuinely believe that engineering is a team sport, and that no matter how quote unquote brilliant an individual engineer might be, if he or she is working off in a silo, or he or she is being destructive or aggressive towards the rest of the team, pretty much no amount of individual brilliance can overcome the negative impact that has on the organization overall, because tech platforms are large and complex. They need multiple people working together. And you as the manager or leader really need to create the environment where people can be brilliant by how they work together and how they bring their efforts together in a seamless way to produce success for the business. And that just comes from hundreds of daily actions and not from any kind of rhetoric.
Nice. All right. What projects or achievements at Upwave are you most proud of and why?
Yeah, so there's two things, both of which I've touched on a bit earlier. One, the kind of flashier one, is the generative AI that we call them our AI campaign insights reports that we rolled out earlier this year. I think those are just really impactful and useful for customers. We're already seeing heavy adoption for them and seeing customers tell us that they've saved them a lot of time and have both help them understand what's going on, help them communicate with their end stakeholders and so on. And it's a real practical production application of generative AI, so using GPT-4 to do something that would have been literally impossible to do before it. So it's really cool to actually see AI in action and directly adding values to customers. This is not just a flashy demo. This is an actual production application that people are getting real value out of. So I'm very proud that we've been able to build something like that. The second thing I'll say is just the extent to which we have been able to rein in the complexity of doing measurement and automate it. It's just years and years of effort and analysis to understand all the different places when humans have needed to be involved in this process, why they needed to be involved, so the complexity they were dealing with, and then progressively building more and more parts of our system to automate that all end to end. You wish that there was just one thing, that if you built a system that did this one thing, then everything would just magically be automated. But in practice, that's not how it works. It's just there's dozens and dozens of different touch points that we've had to handle one at a time, but through long-term patience, analysis, and engineering, we've been able to get to just a really smooth and automated solution that I think is transformative for the industry.
Brilliant, man. All right, George, we're coming to an end, and I would now like to have a quick rapid fire round with you. Are you ready for that?
Sure thing.
Okay. What habit holds you back the most?
I think probably I have a temptation to spend a little bit too much time on individual tasks, trying to make them all super high quality. Calling oneself a perfectionist is a little bit cliche, but I think I do have that tendency. And when I was an IC, individual contributor, I really put a lot of emphasis on trying to make sure that all the code I wrote was really good and effective. When I was a line manager, making sure that everyone really kind of got the full attention and support that they needed, and all the communications were perfectly crafted. As CTO, there's just so many things that I have to do on a daily basis and so many balls to juggle that the only way to keep all the balls in the air is to be okay with doing a good enough job on certain things, even if it's less than the ideal I would have liked, because it's just more important to keep the balls in the air than it is to do a great job of every individual thing. And that's becoming CTO has been one of the harder transition points for me.
All right. What chore do you absolutely despise doing? It could be personal, man. You don't have to always answer professionally. This is a personal round.
Yeah, I would say we have to do finance, tax, accounting stuff, and carefully categorize and summarize all of our projects to make sure that they're properly reported for tax purposes, and that's a tedious one.
What career did you dream of having as a kid?
Astronaut.
Ah, okay. What was your last Google search, or maybe like your last Gen AI prompt?
Might have been looking you up on LinkedIn to understand what I was getting myself into.
All right. Now coming to a very last question. What subject do you find to be most fascinating?
I am very interested in economics in general because I think it combines philosophy's orientation around how through understanding the world around us and thinking things through deeply with a practicality that focuses on trying to understand the real world day to day and a bigger picture. I think it's really interesting to think about the interplay between economics and culture and advertising and how society evolves over time and how that's influenced by technology. It all comes together under that general economic lens.
Hi, George. It was amazing. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. Loved the experiences, the wisdom that you have shared in today's session. And I truly appreciate your time here with me. Thank you so much, buddy.
Yeah, it was great speaking. Thanks for your time as well.